Thank you for joining us today and welcome to our plant-powered webinar. Today's webinar is near and dear to my heart, and that topic is plant-based kids. As a reminder, you are muted on your end, so we cannot hear you or see you. And if you have any questions to ask, please place them in the chat and we'll get to questions at the end of the session. So I'm very excited to introduce our two experts today, starting with our very own lifestyle medicine in our practice, our registered dietitian, and that's Lori. Lori is a registered dietitian with Corewell Health, providing individual nutrition education along with group classes. Lori has 20 years of experience as a dietitian, 12 of which have been with Corewell. Lori is a certified specialist in pediatrics who recently transitioned to lifestyle medicine to share her passion for whole food plant-based nutrition and the benefits it can bring to individual health and wellness. Lori has 3 children herself, and just like the rest of us, feeding them healthy and have them be agreeable to that is always an adventure. We also have with us Dr. Dudley, who is from Southwest Michigan originally. She went to St. Mary's College in Notre Dame and graduated medical school from Des Moines University in Iowa. She completed her pediatric residency at Ascension St. John's in Detroit, where she was chief resident. Dr. Dudley is board certified in pediatrics and lifestyle medicine and trained in culinary medicine through the Health Meets Food program. She teaches culinary medicine to medical residents and to community members in the Family Kitchen program. Dr. Dudley is the proud wife of her anesthesiologist husband and mother of 5 amazing children. They range in ages from 2 to 11 years old. So she is very well versed on this topic. Dr. Dudley's family has been plant-based since 2017, and you can find the meals and lunch boxes she serves her family on her Instagram account at Deliciously Dr. Dudley. You can join Dr. Dudley and other community members monthly at the free walking group she charters through Walk with a Doc in St. Joe's, Michigan. For any information on that, we will include that in our email out to you all this week. And without further ado, I will hand the presentation over to our 2 wonderful ladies.
Thank you so much, Kara. That was great. So everyone, we're so happy to be with you here today. And this is a topic that, as Lori and I were preparing this presentation, we both agreed that, it is such a broad conversation. It could be, almost every bullet point that we're going to go over could be its own topic, its own book. There's so much information, but we don't want to extend that overwhelm to you all. What we're really trying to do is to encourage you and to give you hope that having a plant-based family is very doable and something that we can achieve and should not be afraid of. So we wanted to start with this really appropriate quote that I have heard several times, and I was so happy that Lori found it for us again, because we're going to be speaking about children, but in the whole spectrum of age ranges. So we know this is from the from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. We know that appropriately planned vegetarian, including vegan diets are healthful, nutritionally adequate, and may provide health benefits in the prevention and treatment of certain diseases. These diets are appropriate for all stages of the life cycle, including pregnancy, lactation, infancy, childhood, adolescence, older adulthood, and for athletes. And so with that, if you can go to the next slide, please, Lori, thank you. I wanted to just really broadly talk about the plant-based plate. So I know that you all have most likely heard other conversations about this topic and maybe even seen other diagrams, but especially as a pediatrician, I was really happy that the American College of Lifestyle Medicine came out with this beautiful depiction of a pediatric plant-based plate. So it's basically the exact same as the adult plant-based plate. And I want that to be emphasized because that's how simple this can be. The same foods that are fed through the whole family can also be fed to the children. And so there are some modifications, and that's obviously why we're going to be speaking today. But in this plate, truly what they did was just put the fruits and vegetables in rainbow order to make it look more appealing and fun for kids. But it's the same basic components that we know from a plant-based diet. Fruits and vegetables, nuts, seeds, legumes, whole grains, plenty of water, herbs and spices. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Starting from pregnancy. Now, I will admit that I am the mother of 5 children, but I only had to go through 4 pregnancies because I do have a set of twins in there. So in that regards, I am with all of the women who are hoping to become pregnant or who are currently pregnant. And I just wanted to encourage you in this time to be hopeful, and also know that maybe you're not in that space or that time yet in your life, that season, but knowing that achieving optimal health before we even attempt to plan to start a family is really ideal, so that we know that our body is already equipped. And this goes for women, but also for men, obviously, that we want our bodies to be as healthy as they can be before that time comes. But also speaking specifically about pregnancy, this may be a time that when someone finds out they're pregnant, they have the thought that, okay, now is a great time to start to be healthy. And that can be a little challenging because, as some of you may know, that when you are pregnant, you're very tired. You may feel nauseous. You may not have the same time because you have more appointments. You have more things that you're thinking about and trying to plan and prepare. And so it may be actually a really tricky time to dramatically modify your diet. So if you are in that place right now, I just want to encourage you to take in some information and gather information, find your references, find your data points and keep them, but maybe only start with small changes right now, doable changes that you can sustain, because it could be so challenging. A diet and nutrition that is well planned, meaning not eliminating foods completely or only having one really strict regimen or only having one specific meal consistently. If we have a variety, that's what well planned means, then we can have a diet that is very helpful in this time of life. The goal of pregnancy, as we should be aware, is to grow a healthy baby while sustaining mom's health. So we don't want the baby to be getting all of the nutrients that mom had and mom is not replenishing them. So it's really important that we continue to offer the pregnant mother plenty of calories and also nutrients so that she is building her own capacity while feeding the baby at the same time. This can be done by having a wide variety of plant foods. And most women need to take prenatal vitamins. I'm not an OB-gynecologist and I'm not your OB-gynecologist. So please speak with them specifically if you have concerns about particular nutrients. But most women who are pregnant will need to take a multivitamin, prenatal vitamins specifically, but a lot of women's vitamins have some of these same compounds, if not all of them as well, in some various formulations. But those would include folate, B12, vitamin D, iodine, omega-3s like DHA and EPA, and iron in varying degrees. Some women need to take more or less of certain of these compounds than others. And so that's why I want you to speak with your physician specifically, but those are things to consider. Also during this time, obviously being really mindful of hydration to keep up energy, to sustain ourselves, sustain the baby. And then also avoiding risks. I couldn't go without saying this, which means reducing harm in all ways, but especially using alcohol or smoking or other substances that could be risky to ourselves or to the baby. One way that we can maybe keep track of all of these things, like I said, you have a lot on your mind already, is Dr. Greger's Daily Dozen. Now, I'm not saying you have to follow this like a prescription per se, especially because I know very well that there are many days when I was pregnant that I could not physically make myself consume some of these foods. Like I couldn't look at a salad. It made me so nauseated. So there are foods that might have their time and place. And maybe using this as a guideline, you'll notice in these categories, there are certain servings that we know are going to help us achieve our best health. But do they look different while I'm pregnant? Maybe I get my greens in a smoothie, or I get my greens, every other day. I can't get them every day, but at least I'm keeping them in mind still and not saying those make me sick, I'm going to totally avoid them. Can I maybe achieve those goals in another way? So Dr. Greger is actually someone who you may know is on our schedule upcoming to speak with us about his new book, How Not to Age. This is taken from his How Not to Die series. And this is also from nutritionfacts.org, and then his app called The Daily Dozen, which I can't plug it enough. It's fantastic. And it's just a really great, simple resource. So if you have if you have the ability to download this app, I think it would be really helpful for your plant-based journey. Okay, next slide, please. Now, you may see some pictures with some of my children or with other children in them. This happens to be my fifth baby. He's 2 now, but he's in this picture right here. So I wanted to break down infancy a little bit because infancy is up until age 1, but there's 2 very distinct periods that pediatricians think of, and that's the early part, which is from a newborn baby to 6 months, and then from a 6-month to 1-year-old. So in early infancy, the goal is really this wide goal of having sufficient calories, sufficient nutrients for exponential growth. You know that a little baby can be born, maybe 6.5 pounds, 7 pounds, give or take, quite a bit, but then they double their weight by 4 months, triple their weight by 12 months. So this is a wide change, a vast change. So we know that a baby at this age, their primary goal is a high fat and a calorie dense diet, which at this time we all understand is milk in some form. So for some babies, that's breast milk, whether that's from their mom, donor milk, expressed milk, bottle, however it's given. Maybe it's even G-tube, or maybe the baby's in the NICU and they're getting supplemental feedings. But breast milk is a prime source for high fat, calorie dense babies' needs. Also, formula. Formula is fantastic. We're so lucky and blessed that we have this option for so many babies who utilize it and thrive on formula. And if you wanted to have a completely plant-based diet option for your baby, soy formula, if that's available for your baby, if that's an option for your family, and if your baby tolerates it well, that's a fantastic option. It has all of the added nutrients and vitamins that your baby needs. The fat content, carbohydrate content, protein content would all be fantastic for most growing babies. And so I just wanted to say, however you feed your baby, that is a appropriate milk for an infant is a great choice, as long as they're getting the appropriate volume, and that if it's formula, that it's mixed appropriately. If a baby is breastfed through their mother's milk, they have the extra benefit of having some new exposures. So we know from data that babies can actually have different tastes that they are getting throughout the day, depending on what mom eats. And they may actually learn to prefer foods that mom commonly eats. So in this picture, I am eating my lunch because if you might know, when you're nursing a baby, you're ravenous. It's like a hunger that I can't even explain, especially when I was breastfeeding my twins. That's wild. And so I'm kind of propping my plate on the baby and eating my lunch while I'm feeding him. He always was hungry when I was hungry, which also kind of, is not a coincidence. Babies know that that's like a social time, that eating is a time to be together, and so that makes sense. And I just wanted to show that you can have a healthy diet and have something that is rich in phytonutrients and fiber and different flavors, and that knowing that you're offering all those things to your baby, that it may actually be helpful when you start giving them solids. They'll recognize and prefer some of the foods that you ate in pregnancy and also while breastfeeding. So that's something to think about. And moms who are taking appropriate vitamins or supplements, if necessary, like vitamin D is one that I think of especially, that is also excreted in the breast milk in certain quantities. So if she's taking enough, the baby will also be getting it that way. Okay, Lori. Okay, next, late infancy, like I said, that's that 6-month to 1-year-old time period. Milk is still the main calorie source. I need to emphasize that. So from 0 to 1, it's milk. For a lot of babies, that's even up through 2. Babies can have milk after that time, but definitely age 1, and then 1 to 2, there's still a lot of milk, but it's not the only source. But definitely up until age 1, milk is the primary source of any calories that a baby should be getting. And when I say milk, I mean breast milk or formula, or the appropriate formula for that baby. The goals of this age group are to use food, usually around 6 months. There are a couple nuances in that, but around age 6 months, that food is a supplement, which means milk is the primary source. Food is for exploration. Food is for learning new things. Parents are teachers, caregivers are teachers. So we are letting the baby explore. We are encouraging their senses and letting them find new foods that we offer. And it also, something to think about, is a good time actually for allergen exposure. So especially babies that maybe have a first degree relative, a parent, a sibling, someone close in their family that has an allergy, like peanut allergy is one that we always think of. Having early introduction of peanuts in some form, usually it's powdered or thinned peanut butter, having early exposure, and that can be sometimes as early as 4 months, can reduce the baby's risk of it developing a peanut allergy. It has to be done very diligently and very frequently for that to continue to be the case. But if that's something that you're concerned about, allergies of any kind, I would bring that up to your pediatrician. And then, like I said, socialization. If we're feeding a baby, they should be right up at the table in their high chair, properly buckled, safe, not just sat on the bumbo on the table. That can be a little bit tricky for some babies to kind of stay balanced. So making sure that they're safe. But that's a great time for socialization. They see the food going in your mouth. They want the food as well. And then also, I just wanted to demonstrate in this picture too, baby-led weaning. So we're also encouraging independence and teaching early independence in that the baby can bring the food to their mouth. So baby-led weaning is the idea that we are letting the baby lead themselves, weaning off of milk onto foods. So they bring the food to their mouth. And this is an option. And what I mean by that, you don't have to do this, but I think that it is a fantastic, for me, it was really great to use it as a both. So I sometimes offer bites and I sometimes let them eat foods. There are some foods that are really hard for a baby to get to their mouth, but I knew were important to them. So like iron fortified oatmeal, that is one food that is definitely processed and fortified that I would highly recommend for babies because they need iron. And there's really not another great way to get it into babies. So that powdered flaked baby cereal like oats, the baby oatmeal is a great source for that. So maybe you mix regular oats, regular oatmeal with a little powdered baby oatmeal, a little orange juice or some smashed grapefruit or something to stir in so that they're absorbing the iron with that added vitamin C. And that's a really great way to give that exposure. Also, some other first foods that you might consider, it's okay. Some really high fat foods. So like I said, they need really high fat, calorie dense. So like avocado is one that we always mention as plant-based pediatricians, but also things like beans smashed, tofu that can be crumbled or scrambled or just smashed, or even the silken kind and just eaten with a spoon, veggies, berries, obviously, making sure that the baby isn't going to choke on them, but they don't have to be all purees. Some could be purees. They don't have to be purees. And then also whatever the family is eating, like you don't have to make lots of other meals. Like I said, I want this to kind of feel easy. Like if you're eating something that could be safe for the baby, how can we modify it to give to the baby? Maybe we take the salt out, like we don't salt it. We salt ours later at the table, but we don't put the salt in first. But it can have spices. Spices don't have to be hot, just spices as in flavors, herbs, that kind of thing. Whatever is culturally appropriate to your family. Maybe it's curry, but it's not super spicy. But those seasonings would be fantastic for a baby. So those are all antioxidant rich and healthful for the baby. Okay. So toddlers are a wonderful age. I think a really fun age. Yes, they're difficult. Like I said, I have a 2-year-old right now. So I'm with you, toddler families. The goal in this age, this is from about age 1 to 3, is growth, not only physically though, it's growth in our body, but also growth in our brain, developmentally, socially, physically, all of the areas. And we really need to make sure that we focus on high fat and high calorie dense foods, at least until 2, like I said, so that part of that is milk of some form. They can be breastfeeding, taking formula or soy milk, but then also maybe they have avocado or nut butters or tofu or beans or other things that can have high calorie dense properties. So something to keep thinking about. Allowing the baby to play with food, helping you pick out things at the grocery store, talking about colors, talking about shapes. They can maybe wash foods. They can maybe help you squish something. That's all encouraging them to have an exposure, even if they never put those foods in their mouth. Those exposures all count. So we're teaching the baby at this age to develop their palate, to enjoy all of these foods that we want them to know and love as older adults and older children even. Something else that I love mentioning is the concept of you're all one family, whoever that is, however that family looks for you. It's one family, so you should be eating one meal. So what I mean is this isn't a time to make a special dish for the baby, or we shouldn't be thinking the baby has to get something completely different. What I'm showing in the picture here is my son sitting down to eat at a small table, so it's accessible for him. He does come to the table, but especially like lunchtime, breakfast, it's nice to have him feel independent and let himself sit. Even if he spills stuff on the floor, it's low to the ground, and he has safe utensils and like a bamboo cup or a plastic cup that he can use. But it's the same meal I ate. I just maybe cut his differently, or like I said, season his a little bit differently, just make it more accessible to him, but same foods. And you'll see that over and over again. The plate that shows the 4 plates that are the same, that would be a completely appropriate meal for a toddler. This was for my 4 older children, but I served the baby the same thing. So like a pasta dish that the baby could pick up really easily. They wouldn't get as much, but they would get the same meal. The sauteed or soft cooked vegetables, a smoothie is fantastic for a toddler, especially they can easily take in lots of nutrients that way. Totally fine to repeat the baby's favorite foods as long as it's not the only thing they eat. Again, we want to have a planned diet that offers lots of variety. But if they like blueberries all the time, blueberries are fantastic food. So maybe you offer a meal that or a food item that they love, and also a food item that they're still learning to like. And that's a great way to kind of have those exposures feel safe for the kid. Another question that I commonly get, maybe families will say, well, it's hard to get my kids to like vegetables, but they love fruit. Great. Keep offering lots of fruit. And again, lots of varieties of fruit if you can, but then also when you can add more vegetables. So knowing that there's lots of nutrients, fiber, um, healthy vitamins and nutrients that we need in fruit, we can also get them in vegetables, but knowing that at this time we're trying to just get them used to these healthy foods and that it's okay if they prefer more fruits. Something I want to briefly mention is when we are packing foods for the baby or serving foods in a different place, maybe we're out to eat, maybe we're at a family's house, maybe grandma is watching the baby, that generally is not a great time for new foods for a toddler. And the reason why is that sometimes, especially if someone who doesn't know the baby well, like it's a babysitter who doesn't feed them all the time, or they're at daycare and they're not watching them, just one-on-one eating, it might not be safe for the baby if they're offered, or for the child if they're offered a food that they're not familiar with. Maybe they don't know that they have to chew on that a little bit differently, or it's going to be harder to swallow, or they should take a bite before they put the whole piece in their mouth. So I don't recommend that being a time for new exposures when they're outside of the home, but just offering the comfortable, safe foods that the baby can have, that they're not allergic to, that they're comfortable with, and that are easy at that time. Something else to think about with kids who are having a plant-based diet is that they do need a lot of calories, and they may even need more volume of foods than maybe a child who's getting really fat dense, or maybe heavy animal products that maybe have other higher calorie but a smaller volume. Plant foods tend to have more fiber, and so that can fill up the baby's or the child's belly faster before they get maybe the volume that they need. So thinking about breaking up foods into snacks across the day is also a good option. So maybe they have 3 meals a day, but also 2 to 3 snacks, because they're going to be having like mini meals, so that they can get enough volume to have all those healthy nutrients that they need without the fiber filling them up at one meal and then they don't want any more food. I hope that makes sense. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so childhood. This is where I'm like in the heat of this right now, right? With my 4 older children. So this is the age range from about 3 years old to 11. Some people also think of this as like grade school kind of time, and like pre-adolescence for some of those older kids. The goal in this area is still growth, but the growth is significantly slowed. They're not tripling their weight in a couple months, right? So this is sustained growth, but a little bit slower than in those first early years. We still want to obviously encourage exposure to new foods. This is a great time to actually move more towards plant-based, because you can have like a logical discussion hopefully, with your kids and kind of like talk about, okay, how do you want to try these new foods? Or can we pick a new red food this week? Or, this one is on sale. How could we use this at home? Or I see they have frozen whatever. How can we use that in this meal? So thinking about those topics, this might actually be a really fun time to transition to a plant-based diet. This is a great time to think about, why is our family making this choice? Why do we have healthy habits? What is nutrition, just in a real basic level? Food does what? Starting that early healthy relationship with food, so that children know that food is fuel, and that can come in lots of different forms, and what we eat might not be what someone else eats, and that's okay. And how can we incorporate foods that help our bodies feel good? And can we sometimes still incorporate snacks or treats or foods that maybe even be out, that are outside of that we're talking about? But one food isn't good and one food is bad. It's just these foods give our body different needs. So that's something to kind of start early, I think. And also, the family is a team. Like I said before, the family, it's one family, it's one meal. So how can we all think about, okay, so and so likes this kind of food or this meal, or so and so really like that one. So how can we meal plan so that we're getting all the things that we like, but also all the nutrient needs met? And can the kids help prepare? Can the kids help unpack the groceries if they're just small? Or can they help with the dishes if they can't cook? My children love to help pull right up to the stove, and I watch them, obviously, and they're safe while they're doing it, but they love to help stir something, or to help sprinkle on seasoning. So it's a great time to get them to start that early part of independence in the kitchen as well. Some opportunities as a plant-based family, I don't want to call these challenges necessarily, but they are opportunities, are thinking about packing a lunch. So it depends on what your school or daycare situation is. Does your child need to pack a lunch, or are they going to be offered a lunch or have like a hot lunch option? And can they make healthful choices that are within your values or within your family goals at school or daycare or whatever other location that they're being served food? Or do they need to pack something? Or can we even pack like a supplement to whatever we're having? Because we know they'll offer something that we can have, but we don't like something, or something that maybe, like I said, doesn't fall into our values. So how can that look for our family? And can we plan when there's school or daycare or sports, snacks or treats offered, or a party, or different activities that involve food? Everything is a holiday, it seems like, and everything is a party, and everything has a treat that goes with it. And so how can we make sure that those options are what our family likes? And if you know me, you know that, man, I love a holiday. I love a celebratory food, but how can we make it, look fun, be fun, but maybe, like I said, incorporate more fruits and vegetables, for example. And you'll see some examples later on in the presentation as well. How can we guide our kids maybe through some difficult conversations? I think that as parents, but also, being a pediatrician, I've seen lots of different opportunities come up. So maybe that's with restricted eating. Maybe that's with difficulties regarding obesity, or that conversation at home or at school, or unfortunately with the pediatrician, having some of those conversations that maybe do or do not need to happen, and guiding your child through that. So I think if you have those specific questions, that would be something to maybe ask about later, or maybe even ask your pediatrician or someone else that you trust about that, because there's going to be some difficult conversations regarding moving more towards a plant-based diet. So just kind of bringing that up, because it can definitely be something that can be encouraging at the end. Teaching your child to advocate for themselves in everything, but also in their food choices. Can they be the boss of their body in this way? So I think this is a great time to kind of have that concept come up as well. And then also planning for busy nights, like not being stunned that busy nights happen, because we know that they will. So how can we plan for that? So have a meal that we go to. You'll see in the 4-plate picture here, it's like spaghetti. Yes, it's a blended up sauce that has, I think it's like red pepper sauce or something that I blended, but it's basically spaghetti. And then like the most basic salad you could ever imagine, and then some cut up apples. Like, great. That has all the nutrients they need. It's whole wheat pasta, so we know that it has lots of protein, whole grains. They're getting a vegetable, they're getting a fruit. There's a couple of colors in there. I'm happy. That's fantastic. If this is the type of meal that your family has, that's a great option. It doesn't have to be more difficult than that. So I wanted to, to kind of show it can be a very simple meal. And maybe not everybody's plate looks the same, but they might be learning to like it. And so I just want to emphasize that can be fantastic as well. Okay, next. All right, here we go. Here's all the fun stuff, right? So this was so hard for me to whittle down, and I changed. Lori will know. I changed a lot of these pictures multiple times because I wanted to make sure I got some really fun ones in there. So there's lots of different pictures that I'm showing here, but there was actual studies that showed that kids will eat foods if it's rainbow colored. So like in a rainbow, or if it looks like a pretty picture. And especially they love things cut into stars specifically, but any kind of shape, but stars are something that kids are really drawn to. So having bright colors, we all eat with our eyes first. So making it look fun. You don't have to make an Elmo fruit platter, but man, that's a pretty fun way to have a party snack that, this was for my twins' preschool class. They went nuts, and they didn't even realize that they were dipping it in plant-based yogurt. They thought that was fantastic. They were all so excited. It was gone in seconds, but they thought it was a really special treat. As excited as they would be about cupcakes, they felt that way about strawberries. So how can we maybe introduce these foods in a fun way? And it does not have to be this elaborate. I fully recognize that this is, something that is at times a privilege, but also something that is unnecessary. But can it be fun at times? Absolutely. So having fruits and vegetables in a way that are appealing to children, even a simple hummus plate, like a little heart-shaped bowl that I have there, the heart-shaped bowl like makes it way more fun, and that's just hummus. So how can we make something that is appealing to children, so that they continue to love these foods and don't feel left out, maybe, or don't feel like they're being restricted, and that they can even help in the process. Okay.
All right. I am going to take it from here. Thank you, Dr. Dudley. That was amazing.
Thank you.
I was just looking at the last slide and wondering how I can incorporate that green platter for St. Patty's Day. It was just amazing.
That was fun.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
So much. Yeah, it was great talk. So we're going to transition a little bit more into more of that adolescence and older kid area. First, looking at kind of elaborating on those picnics and parties and travel and holidays and family events and how we handle those. So one tip and trick is to ask the host what's on the menu. And it is not uncommon for somebody to be like having even an allergy per se. So if your child has an allergy, you would probably ask the host what's on the menu. So that way you could supplement and you could add to it, you could modify. And that's going to be no different than if you wanted to bring something to the party and make it more plant-based, so that way you had a little bit more option. You could also eat before the event. You can offer to bring something to share, and that's always a great way. And it complements what the host is doing, and it's participatory. It allows you to be engaged with what food is on the table because you offered and brought something of your own. For parties, bringing something similar to substitute in, again, kind of seeing what the host is bringing and then allowing to elaborate on that. You can always pack snacks, and this is one, especially for travel. My kids are into sports, so we have hotel stays and we have traveling in a car for a couple hours, to get to certain places, and packing snacks. I always call it our boat bag. We just pack that boat bag and it's full of all the utensils. It's full of plates and napkins and snacks, things that are more self-sustaining, and then things that we make ahead of time and pack in a cooler. So there's always options that they can go to when they're in the car. We even have a little hot plate that I can plug in, nice. And that allows them to still have potatoes or, things that they prefer to have warmed up rather than cold. And it'll, again, allows for that travel experience where we're not stopping at a fast food place, or we're not spending the extra additional funds during those travel. And you can do that for vacations too. You can do that for destinations, and it's kind of, to Dr. Dudley's point, it's the planning ahead. You're having that forethought of, what is this trip going to look like? What are we going to need in the car? What are we going to need when we get to the hotel? What are we going to need when we get to this party, when we get to the holiday event? And what I find and what I love, especially with those holidays, is that
sometimes your dishes that you bring are the ones that go over the best. I know I always kind of do a fallback to lasagna because there's a really good ricotta cheese that's made out of tofu. That's again, it's one that I've never had anybody scoff at. It's never been one that people have. I mean, I've always gotten compliments on it. I've always gotten just, oh my gosh, can you make your lasagna? You know, and it's again, it's one of those fallbacks that I know is one of those safe, go-to, quick, easy, pretty manageable for anybody in addition to my own family to have. And so maybe choosing to eat whatever's offered. And this goes to kind of, we kind of call it like a 90-10. So if 90% of your eating habits are within your own house, within your family, as a family unit, and then that 10% maybe at the parties or the travel or the holiday events where you are eating kind of off script or you're eating other foods that you may not typically eat. And that's okay. And that's where that transition comes into play. If we are not fully plant-based and you still are incorporating some of those healthy foods while still being mindful of, hey, can we get a vegetable? Can we get a fruit? Can we get a whole grain? While still balancing that meal as best we can. So moving to adolescence, one of the things for adolescence is the goals specifically is calories for growth and energy. So when we talk, and I'm gonna my notes real quick. So when we talk calories and growth, adolescence is a very, very large growth period. And then also independence, right? They are getting friends, they're going over to places and friends' houses, they're going to events, they're going to sporting events. All of those things typically involve food and involve friends and involve peer influences, which I'll actually get to in the next slide over. But involving your kids early, as kind of what Dr. Dudley said, having them come up to the counter and stir the food, having them get the ingredient out of the pantry, having them portion out in the cup and putting it in the bowl, involving the kids in those early food choices and cooking can then help during those adolescent years because they're familiar with it. They have that exposure and they have that knowledge and they have that education of why you're choosing to eat some of these foods and bring some of these foods into your household. Educating them, having those honest conversations about why we're choosing those foods and the nutrients that are within the foods. Knowledge is power. It's one of those where if you can have a base understanding of why you're eating the foods that you're eating, it can really lend to them making good choices when they're outside of the house. And then also even recognizing, hey, you know, we have an aunt or an uncle or a grandma or a grandpa that is battling heart disease or high blood pressure or diabetes, and not having it be a negative with food, but having it be a positive with food, where we are bringing these foods in to help our bodies with these diseases to prevent and reduce the risk of heart disease and cancer and diabetes. And so it can all play a role together, offering opportunities to make those good choices. So this is one, oh, sorry about that. So this is where lighthouse parenting, some of you guys may have heard of that term or not, but it's essentially being that pillar, being that shining light like a lighthouse and letting you guide your kids and letting them ride the waves and having them make some of those mistakes and make some of those choices. I think one of the biggest things is that teens can be tricky and they may feel the impact of those food choices and they may not feel the impact of those food choices. And I have two prime examples. I've got one child who very much feels the impact when she doesn't eat kind of some of those plant-based foods, and it physically impacts her. So she has more incentive and a little bit more guidance of why she's eating the way that she's eating and some of those food choices that she gets and chooses to make. And my other child, she's not impacted at all with some of those food choices. And so it's a little bit more out of sight, out of mind. I go to friends' houses, I get some of their food and it doesn't impact me. So why am I doing it? So again, it's different and every child is different and every child has different kind of reasons and motivating factors to continue making some of those choices while they're outside of the house. And again, you being a good role model and you setting that stage within the house allows that influence to continue outside of the house. And it's no different than a lot of other morals and values that you place within your house. Your kids are going to go out and they may make those changes and they may adjust and they may not follow what you raised them with, but they may come back to that. And because they have that groundwork, they have that sound educational knowledge of why you made those choices with their foods, especially during their growing years. So this is where diving in a little bit more to those growth patterns. So males essentially can gain 4 inches per year during their peak velocity. Females 3 inches per year, again, during that peak growth period. Females are typically anywhere from 10 to 16 years, usually hitting their kind of max at that 16, whereas males, as some people know, somebody that was still growing in college, I'm sure, but typically they're hitting, their peak around that 18 years of age. But recognizing, and Dr. Dudley noted and touched on this a little bit, the plant-based foods are typically lower in calorie for the volume that you get. So it's, and Dr. Arns talked about this during the first presentation with calorie density. So these foods are, again, lower in calorie for the volume that you're getting. And you have an adolescent who's growing exponentially and is hungry. You always hear the phrase, eating you out of house and home. I mean, they're needing those calories and they're needing that food. And so portion sizes for plant-based may be more food than what you're expecting. It may be a lot of food where you're eating every couple hours and you're providing these fruit bowls and these salad bowls and these taco, these are black bean tacos in the picture. But again, it can be a large quantity of food. And so everybody's a little bit different. And monitoring and talking with your pediatrician in regards to those growth patterns is a great recommendation. And I can't stress that enough. If those growth patterns are shifting or changing, in that overall picture, that's a conversation that you can have, whether your child may need additional food or whether they may need different food, making sure that we're meeting the nutrition that they need. With that being said, sometimes it does take time to transition. I will be perfectly honest, my family as a whole is still in that transition phase to plant-based. I myself have been doing it for a while, but with, again, those adolescents, I do like Dr. Dudley's term for opportunities versus challenges. So it can be a slow going and it can take time. It definitely does help when you have such a great team and you have great resources and you have great support for those changes. And again, keeping that family as a whole with everybody's eating this dinner, this is what we're making, this is why we're making it, including the children with cooking, with baking even. I know actually all of my kids really love, they do like to bake. They do like to make food and different recipes and different things that they're learning, from friends that made a muffin and they want to try that at their house. So that's where peer influence can really play a role. And they can be peer influence for their own friends. So going out to restaurants, one of the things, especially again with my child who is impacted by the food choices, she'll go pick up her food at a restaurant and then bring it to where her friends are. So that way, they make a little pit stop for her. She gets the food and then they go to the restaurant that they're going to because she knows that food is better tolerated and she feels better by eating that food. And then she'll just eat it with the rest of her friends and it's not even a big deal to her. So your child can be influenced by their peers or they can influence their peers. So you can kind of go either way, but encouraging, right, why they're eating that way and having that autonomy, having that empowerment for your child to explain to their friends of some of those food choices and why. With vitamins and minerals, So this is B12 is definitely one, especially on a plant-based eating plan. Vitamin D for those in Michigan, that's one that we always kind of pay attention to. And I know there are probably people listening that are outside of Michigan, so you can always talk with your doctor in regards to those additional vitamins and mineral supplementations that may be needed. Omega-3 is another one. So depending on if your child's able to get flaxseed or chia seed, these acai bowls I have found, and you don't have to spend a lot of money outside at a restaurant to get the acai bowls. You can blend them up in a blender. You can add your fruit and your berries, your chia seeds, your granolas, so you can really make a good version of those within your own house. And that's also another way to help influence your child, is by mimicking what can be found in stores or what can be found in restaurants and trying to duplicate and replicate that within their own home. So I digress, because that's actually on the next slide over. So with adolescents, iron is another one. So girls that are of menstruating age, iron is going to be important. These foods that are rich in iron will be dark leafy greens, tofu, tempeh, edamame, chickpeas, lentils, beans, quinoa, beet greens, or even pumpkin seeds. So pumpkin seeds can be a great little add. We can add it to even like the autumn soups. We can add it to even just the toppings, and it can even just be seeds that you just eat plain too, which can be kind of fun. And then calcium's another one. Calcium needs do increase 1,300 milligrams per day for that adolescent group and that adolescent age. Tofu, tempeh, chickpea, beans, Brazil nuts, chia seeds, ground flax seeds, even broccoli and oranges. Those are going to be some good calcium food sources. So working that in, right? Working that in with that plant plate, and you'll see a lot of that variety that comes in. Again, talk to your doctor in regards to specifically your child. I know some kids are very selective with their eating patterns, and they may only have 5, 6 foods at their repertoire. And that can be concerning, because that does make you concerned about those vitamins and minerals, and makes you concerned about some of those other things that they may be needing. So supplements may be needed during that transition time while you're trying to expand that food intake, while you're trying to bring in additional new foods and explore new options. And so it is an option, and it's never one way, right? We want to work with where you're at. We want to work with what you can do within your home, and how you can continue to expand that variety. So I will touch on protein just a little bit, just because it is a topic that tends to get brought up. A lot of times protein, we do get adequate protein if we have a well-balanced plate. Protein, I do talk about actually in my talk in a couple of weeks about powering athletes with plants, but 15% of our calories are from protein. And typically plant-based foods do have and will range from 10 to 25% of protein of calories from protein. So a can of black beans actually has about 20 to 25% of the calories coming from protein. So again, getting that adequate variety of grains and vegetables and beans and lentils and soy and edamame can and will and should meet those protein needs. There's a quote that we're more fiber deficient than protein deficient. And so it's always something that I like to just note, that really trying to encourage increased fiber in those rich fiber foods, because those will also contain that protein as well. So it's a 2-for-1 special. And then fluid, definitely adequate fluid. Teenagers, I feel like, can sometimes go to the energy drinks and the Red Bulls and the coffee and the Frappuccinos from Starbucks. I mean, you name it. And I'm guilty too, right? I mean, my kids have definitely picked up Starbucks on the way to school in the morning. So again, just trying to, hey, are there herbal teas that we can bring in? Are there water infused with fruit? Are there other options that we can spice up our fluid where we're not just drinking water, but yet we're limiting those artificial sweeteners, we're eliminating the amount of caffeine, we're eliminating those energy components that are in those fluid drinks. What can we do instead? It's a lot about, kind of that alternative and finding that alternative. which brings me to this next slide, which is our final slide. So that way we'll have time for some questions. But the challenges or opportunities, but it's really those unfamiliar foods. That is where I think the biggest thing is that if something looks different, if something tastes different, if something isn't what they're used to, that's where it becomes a little bit harder to bring that food in. And so I really encourage expanding on current foods and current habits and figuring out what is your child's favorite food. If it's mac and cheese, how can we make mac and cheese a little bit more plant-based, a little bit more nutrient dense? There's a sauce that has cashews and nutritional yeast that turns out pretty darn good. You can even put that on grilled cheese in between two slices of bread and grill it up, and it's fabulous. There's another one that uses squash, acorn or butternut squash. There's another one. So there's numerous different varieties. This is one example. Like here is the plant-based cheese. These are the ingredients that use this, and that's from Minimalist Baker, which is one of my go-tos for some of those alternative cheeses. I find that they're pretty friendly and taste pretty similar. Even if it's a matter of bringing greens into a smoothie. So your child loves a banana strawberry smoothie, but they don't want any vegetables in there. They don't want any seeds or nuts. You know, start with a small amount. We call it food chaining. And so you can, well, that's actually food chaining is essentially where you're mixing. So you have a strawberry banana smoothie, and then you have a strawberry banana smoothie with spinach, and you can mix the two. Or you can just add in small, tiny amounts of those spinach and leafy greens, where it's not necessarily changing the color a ton. Or use colored cups. Those Starbucks cups have colored cups, and it helps mask the color of that smoothie. So things like that, where you can bring in some of those greens, you can bring in some of those seeds and the nuts, blending up chia seed and making a chia seed pudding, doing avocado chocolate pudding. Those foods can really bring in some of those more nutrient dense foods with still having it be a familiar food, having it be a food that they're used to. I was making one in a blender the other day, and it was avocado pudding, and my son came up. I'm like, here, try this, you know, and he took a big bite thinking it was chocolate pudding and was like, oh, that's pretty good. Never in his wildest dream did he know that it had avocado in it, you know, because it looked like chocolate pudding, and he said it tasted good. So like things like that is where you can maximize and really just kind of expand little by little, right? And again, it's a process and it takes time, and sometimes it's easy to go all in one area, but not another area. You know, breakfast foods may be more challenging because you're trying to get out the door, whereas dinner is more easy, or it could be flipped. So anyways, again, just to reiterate, bringing in some of those familiar foods with some of those new foods, as far as your muffins or trail mix or cereal, those can be some really good ways to bring in some of those fruits and the veggies. All right. Some additional further reading education recipes. You guys can take a look at these. I'll leave this slide up just so that way, if anybody wants to venture or ask questions. And then we will go with questions from here. Oh, I think you're on mute, Kara.
Yes, thank you both so much. That was so wonderful and informative. And I love seeing all of the beautiful photos that are on all of the slides. I know, Dr. Dudley, a lot of those came from your creations. So yeah, so great. We just have one. Yeah, we just have one question in the chat about B12. And the question is, do you still have to supplement B12 if you're not 100% plant-based? The app that you recommended, I'm assuming Daily Dozen, says we should be getting 50 micrograms of B12 per day, but then in the same article says the daily value for food labeling is 13.5 micrograms per day. Can you clarify? And what if you also eat fish and dairy?
So that's a great question. And I think that something also to know is that Daily Dozen, that is definitely for adults, and kids have a wide range of needs. And so the volume will, or I'm sorry, the dose will be different, but also even older adults should have more. I think it's after age 60 or 65 that adults need considerably more. I think it's double what a regular adult, just because we absorb it differently. So if you are consuming the thing that you could get if you were going to still be consuming some, you wouldn't know the volume per se, or like the dose that you're getting. If you're eating some dairy or some meat, you wouldn't know, am I getting this number? And I tried, pretty hard to not dive into real specific numbers because, for a few reasons, but one of them, I don't know what omnivore is counting what volume of nutrients they're getting for anything. Really, for a kid, we're just like, here's your food, and we're not really that worried about it. And I think it can be that easy for a plant-based diet also. So yes, there are definitely things that we need to consider. If you are getting a wide variety, the only thing in a plant-based diet that you would need to definitely supplement would be B12, and that is dose based on the size and age of your child. If you want to really go into it a little bit more, the only reason why a omnivorous diet contains any B12, we don't make B12. We get it from organisms in the dirt that animals eat. So, or we eat foods that are supplemented with it. So it's not like meat eaters are getting it from meat. So they are, but not because of the animal, if that makes sense. They're getting it because of the organisms in the ground. And so if you wanted to eat more dirt, that may have some, but also probably not enough because our soil is not as enriched as it used to be. So if you were going to get B12, there are lots of things that are fortified with B12, including milks, both dairy and plant milks have B12 usually added in it, but then also things like cereals, and also like nutritional yeast usually is fortified. So there are definitely some processed or even highly processed foods that can be good for those reasons, because we need some of those additional nutrients no matter the diet that we're on. We can't always get everything from the foods that we take. Just if you think about like even something like iodine, most Americans get iodine, which is vital for life, from salt. And it's because it's added to salt, not because salt has iodine in it. So there's so many things that could be processed that are processed in a good way. So I guess to get back to that, the nutrient actual milligrams or the dose that you might need for B12 and other supplements or other specific vitamins or nutrients will vary for your child. So if you were eating, just to answer your question again, if you were eating 1 egg a day as a maybe plant-based or predominantly plant-based or mostly plant-based person, if you did have an egg a week, I'm sorry, I think I said a day, an egg a week, you would have enough B12. So it wouldn't have to be a lot. So that would be an option. I don't know if that person said specifically if they were eating eggs, but that would definitely be a source that I know specifically that dose, usually 1 egg a week, would be enough for a person to be able to have enough.
Thank you. As good as dirt sounds to eat,
I mean,
I would definitely go with a vitamin. All right. Thank you both so much. That was all of the questions that we had. And thank you all for those of you who joined today or who are listening into the recording. Thank you for being part of this Plant Power Challenge with us, and have a wonderful weekend.
Yes, thank you all so much.
Yes, thank you.